Welcome in this edition of the MPW Digital Postgame Show presented by Dead Soxy. More on them in a minute. I'm Chase Parham, and welcome into the final show of the season. A good one for the Rebels as they knock off Penn State 38-25 in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Really routed the Nittany Lions, followed a little bit of early filling out period, and then Penn State scores late once Ole Miss went into a bit of a prevent defense. But a really pretty perfect day for the Rebels. We're going to talk about it here with you over probably the next couple hours or so. We're going to watch some Orange Bowl. I've got Georgia and Florida State on right now in front of me as well. We're going to talk to Jeffrey Wright in a minute. He's going to join us. We're going to talk to Brian Rippy, who was at the game today from a spectator standpoint. He also has a little bit of a unique perspective from his current whereabouts, and then obviously Neil McCready as well, as we put the cap on the 2023 season and really the story of the day going into 2024. You know, the historic things that have happened, the 11th win, first time in school history they pick up 11 wins, second time in 3 years that they've had 10 wins in the regular season, and then the catapulting that goes into next season. Now, Ole Miss definitely going to be a top 10 team. They are expected to hit on all the retention. They've done such a good time on the transfer portal situation as well. So a lot of things going well for Ole Miss, a lot of things going right for Ole Miss now in that. So again, we're going to talk about all those things here coming up with you in this one as we get going. Yeah, Ole Miss, still seeing the comments there, still need a little work in the offensive line. They've got portal time for that as well. But before we get any further, last year, this year, all the thanks to Dead Soxy. They are the title sponsor of the show. They are here with us for this again. Here is the bowl game, the win over the Peach Bowl. So message for them real quick. The message from Dead Soxy: elevate your game day look with socks that financially support the Rebels. Every step you take shapes the future of Ole Miss athletics. Need more evidence of the impact? Look no further than the recent early signing period and portal class. Sign up for a sock subscription. Get the exclusive Juice Kiffin socks for free. Visit deadsoxy.com. Choose a subscription to receive the latest in Ole Miss styles every month or in an interval that best suits you. Take the next step. Upgrade your socks. Keep the train rolling and elevate Ole Miss. As always, stay Soxy. So take advantage of that. You can see there on the screen. You can sign up for a subscription and you can get going there. Tupelo asking him if I'm feeling okay. I'm much better. I've been pretty sick. Today was the first day where I felt human. Had this been yesterday, I would have been really worried about my voice. I would have been concerned about what it was going to sound like, if it was going to hold up. I thought we might have one of those kind of Jordan flu game situations I was going to have to power through, but we're okay. We're getting it done. We're going to make it through this one as we discuss Ole Miss's win over Penn State. So again, Jeffrey will be here in a minute. We're waiting on Neil. It's a bowl game, so I'm not exactly sure what that post-game situation is going to be like. They've changed up some things from some previous years as far as what the situation is as far as the bowl and how that works. Super chat, thanks from who is it here? Saw it a second ago. There we go. Jay Robertson says Happy New Year to Neil, Chase, and the whole MPW staff. Thanks for a great year of coverage. Tyler Finch, odds of being number 5 preseason. Money's on 5th or 6th, 7th the floor. Thanks you guys as always for all the super chats that you provide for Jeffrey Wright. Can you hear me? How are you?
I indeed can hear you. Man, I'm just really struggling with what's happening in Nashville. I just hate to see that.
What is the score? I am watching Georgia Florida State. I've missed the beginning of that.
Oh, one TV? Oh, that's sad. It's 31-7 after a pick six.
Oh, it's that bad.
Oh no, they could get beat by 40.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's just a shame. It's just an absolute shame that he had to spend so much time recruiting that he couldn't coach his football team. Either way, because there's really not anyone. There's no side that he can take credit for. They're both playing pretty poorly, and so it's a shame.
Did you leave Ole Miss on TV1 at least the entire time?
Oh yeah, I had Ole Miss money line pretty heavy.
So you felt pretty good about that for the most part all week. I guess why, and then as it played out, did it go in line to what you thought?
Did you watch Drew Ayler?
I did. When he tried, he's not a runner, and he was actually better running the football than throwing it.
Correct. I mean,
the best thing that Penn State did for Ole Miss early was decide they needed to establish a passing game.
I have no idea why. Like when they were just running it down the field, when they just absolutely ran it down the field, and then they started passing inside the 10, I was like, well, thank you. I mean, I found myself very impressed with with Penn State's roster in general, like the entirety of the roster, except he's horrible. Like he's truly horrible. Like he's so bad that I got to imagine Penn State they were considering probably, I presume they were thinking they're going to bring him back. I think Penn State's got to search the portal and look for something else because he's that bad. They cannot win with him.
Ooh.
Because that's the thing is like, how does he win? He's a pocket passer. Like he cannot throw. Like that's the problem. Like at least with a guy like, maybe like a guy like Dart, who at times last year did not look good, he still gave you enough in the running game and like kind of moxie and spunk. What does that guy give you? They had 3 big games this year: Michigan, Ohio State, and Ole Miss, and he was horrible in all 3.
So, did he look today like he has looked all season? Is that simply what he is at this point?
Against anyone that – so, when Penn State plays teams that they're just – like, you see, like, that roster, there's studs. Like, up front – and think they even had their starting left tackle, who's going to be probably the number one offensive lineman taken. They had their 2 corners opt out. Like, they're missing some really good players, and they still – it just every single time he looks like he has no feel for the position. He is not wildly accurate. He also does the move that I think a lot of really bad quarterbacks do. Even when he's accurate, he doesn't throw a ball you can catch. Like, it's always late, and there's guys coming in. I mean, he almost got 4 or 5. He almost got – oh, my God, no, not my Tigers. Don't do that to my Tigers. No.
You're going to force me to flip to Auburn instead. A 31-7 game instead of the Orange.
Another turnover. No. Dang it.
It's a bowl game. They're meaningless.
Oh, that's what he's listen, we need to set alerts for when he goes live, press conference, because that's going to be – he's going to talk about, how hard it is to there's too much going on. He's going to make every excuse in the book, and we're going to have to hear it. He is he is really setting himself up that they better not have a couple of bad losses early next year, because that's not exactly a fan base that will stick with you through thick and thin.
No. He's used up every bit of honeymoon that is possible in that. Tons to talk about on offense, so I'm going to hold off on that a minute. From a defensive standpoint, because we're missing Drew Aller, we're already talking about that anyway. They gash Ole Miss on that opening drive. Ole Miss limits them to a field goal. They go up 3-0. Was that a matter? Yeah,
Penn State limits itself to a field goal.
It did. Let's
be clear on that.
They decided to put the ball in the air.
Correct.
And then things happen. Beyond that, Ole Miss did get some interior push. They did a lot of things. Is that adjustments or is that settling into the game?
I think at first what they were trying to do is I think Ole Miss knew, because we talked about it like early in the week. Like they knew they had to stop the run. What I think happened was they thought they had to stop the run with like run blitzes, and the problem with their run blitzes was they were still getting blocked, and so they were leaving essentially. The running backs were getting, like, the first time, there were a couple of runs where the first guy that tackled him was the safety. Like, the first guy that touched him was the safety. And so what I think you saw Ole Miss doing is they started to play it more straight up, and they were willing to sit there and concede 4 or 5 yards in the event that they would not get gashed like they were getting gashed. And then, inconceivably, Penn State, I mean, how many times did they end up? He threw it 39 times, and I know they were behind, but, like, in the first half, let's see. I want to look. In the first half, they threw it 15 times, and that, by my count, was 15 too many.
Yeah, because Penn State, you mentioned it. They're really good up front on both sides of the ball. They're talented in the second in the back half on defense. Like their defense is legitimately good. That's clearly the second, third best talented defense Ole Miss has played this season. However you want to phrase it.
Clearly,
Sure.
yes.
There's no doubt about that. And I thought overall, because I'm kind of scatterbrained, because I've got 10 different thoughts. I thought overall that's what made today relevant and important for Ole Miss. Is the game in general that big of a deal? That's debatable. But they were on a big stage against really a national program for the first time. If you look at their other Access Bowls they played, Baylor, Oklahoma State, not teams where TCU, where it's like, oh, wow, they're playing the Penn State, the Ohio State, the Michigan. And going into 24, why is it doing that? Going into 24 where they're going to have all these expectations and all these things, they played a team that outside of the passing game is nationally competitive, national title talented. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
They probably need some stuff on the outside, the quarterback, sure. But run game, defense, offensive line, they got a complete table set in a neutral environment and on a big stage in a game that had some national pressure for whatever you want to make of that up. That
sure.
really is a catapult to set them up on, hey, that's the standard you've got to be to if you're hitting these expectations next season.
No, it felt like a program game. Like, because we've talked about, like, oftentimes bowl games get either too much or too little. Something like, oftentimes it's like, well, whenever you get beat, well, we didn't care. Mm-hmm. And when you win it, it's like, man, that's a huge thing. But this did feel like a milestone game for Ole Miss. Like, you get to the 11th win. You show up against you're probably the third best roster you've seen all year. I guess I'd listen to an argument for LSU, but I thought that was a more complete roster than LSU with one glaring exception. Mm-hmm. But I mean, like, to me, the thing that was key about today for Ole Miss was I felt like they knew it was going to be difficult. Like, I thought after that first 3 and out, and you avoid, they rule the interception incomplete. Like, I was kind of thinking, I was like, ooh, man, they didn't block anybody on 3 straight plays. Like, I was starting to think, like, oh boy, this could be a long, long day. And they just kind of kept settling in. And then there was that period in the second quarter through about, whatever, 10, 11 minutes left in the fourth quarter, where it's like they felt like they did something on every drive. Like, it felt like either they got a field goal, they got a touchdown. Like, it felt like they were doing, like they were, let's see. So, you had, so if you take out the one punt, the 5-play punt with 2:45, they went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they scored on 7 of 9 possessions, like, kind of in that. And to me, like, that was the key. It's, they weren't maximizing every possession and whatnot, but they were making stuff happen on every possession. And Penn State just felt entirely, if they did not get like a shot, like a shot play or some type of massive explosive, like, it just felt like if Ole Miss could make them have to play an entire series, Ole Miss would be fine. And for the most part, I mean, that's what we saw. During the competitive minutes, 17 points. They get they kind of get the garbage touchdown at the end. But, that is kind of to me, Penn State played about like I thought they would. The difference to me was Ole Miss played even better.
And that coincides Ole Miss offensively right there, as you're talking about, where I don't think they had a traditional run play until the third drive or something. They threw it on every play, or they ran RPOs where they end up putting the ball in the air, and you thought, not getting them involved, they're trying to throw to set up the run, and that even felt disjointed too, and you're going, hey, it's not really working, and then they get Harris on a couple slants and get a little momentum, and look, Penn State was without a corner, and they abused them on the outside. I think they couldn't.
Penn State blitzed, I think, on every play in the first quarter, it felt like.
And I guess in saying that, from that point on, though, where they were able to start hitting slants, really take advantage of the one-on-one stuff, Neil tweeted about it. It was a complete clinic from a play calling standpoint with Weiss or Kiffin or however you want to mix that together. It was, considering the opponent and the disadvantage that they had on the line of scrimmage, that's the best called game that I've seen from Lane and Weiss this season, and maybe in their Ole Miss time together.
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to determine how much of like Ole Miss's offense is actual play calling versus reads. Yeah. Like, I actually think I would make the I get what y'all are saying, and I don't disagree, but I think this was one of the few games all year where it was very straightforward because Penn State knew with the young corners that they were playing, they were not super thrilled at the fact that they knew they were going to leave them one-on-one, and so they just started blitzing the hell out of them. And so then it really became simple for Jackson. It's where's Trey, because Trey was probably going to have, and we saw it. I mean, Trey had one-on-ones almost the whole day. I mean, it felt a lot like was it A&M game that Trey had a big day?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt a lot like that, where, hey, man, that's a defense that's going to man up and blitz a ton and try to beat you with, essentially just not letting you throw it because they're blitzing you and getting sacks and pressures, which is, I mean, I think they were the first or second in the country, I think, in sacks and pressures all year. So, like, that's the strength of their defense. But it kind of made it easy for Ole Miss because it's like, all right, that's where I'm going with the football. And based on the leverage of the DB, it's either back, shoulder. It was, it's kind of predetermined is what I'm saying.
Lane Weiss, whatever. Lane's offenses simplify things in a way that makes them smart by not trying to be too smart, because you had that exact juxtaposition in this game. As we were saying, Franklin could run the football. He could do things, and it's, by God, nope, we got to throw it. We got to establish the passing game. We've got to let Aller basically take Penn State out of the game. And then on the other side, Ole Miss just found matchups and went, you can't stop it. You're going to leave them one-on-one, or you're going to let this. We're just going to keep feeding it. Go. He doesn't out-coach himself to go, nope, we got to get away from that and create this. You just keep blowing that up. And you look at it, Prieskorn was a mismatch. They also schemed Prieskorn open really well today. And then Harris was the crazy mismatch. I mean, those two guys alone go for 17 catches and 270 yards.
No, and I think, whether or not this is true, Penn State's bringing in a new offensive coordinator, but he wasn't calling the game. And so, is this an offensive coordinator that thinks he's auditioning for other jobs? Like, hey, our offensive coordinator couldn't get anything out of Drew Ayler, but watch this. Like, I'll get something out of it. And so you end up just, Lane Kiffin's not worried about trying to get another job right now. He's like, hey, we got to score points. And I don't know. It's just they're so disjointed on offense, Penn State being that, once I saw Ole Miss get into the 30s, I thought the only way Ole Miss would lose was if Ole Miss made a catastrophic mistake, like the type of fumble, like you just give them a touchdown. Once they got up 2 scores, it just felt like, all right, Ole Miss, like maybe, I'm sure there were people that want to see Ole Miss push it at the end and try and run it up. But hey, they made Penn State take all their timeouts. And, essentially at that point, it's like, all right, well, every time we get the ball, we're taking 3 minutes off the clock. And you saw the result.
Yeah, and, Dart, he gets banged up early, first drive of the game. It's the ankle. They retape it up 5-6 times, something like that. Michael, thanks for Super Chat. Just really appreciate the coverage and journalism this year. Thank you. He just keeps finding ways to win. He made a lot of big throws down the field. It might have been one of his better games on hitting his spots on passes, 15 and more down the field today, especially being banged up on that leg, because that does affect you when you're trying to plant and throw and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know. We're a broken record with him. He ends up finishing the year with only 5 interceptions, I guess, at this point. He's good enough to win a championship. Penn State, it was said in the stream, Penn State's in the playoff if they have Jackson Dart.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's Penn State probably beats. And the reality is, if they have Jackson Dart, they probably beat both Ohio State and Michigan.
Yeah. Now, they don't have much of a weapon on the outside. But
no, I mean, I don't yes, they do not have hey, let's just throw it up to this guy. type player, but I mean, he's bad. It is very obvious that, and I mean, he's from Columbus too, right? Like, I think it's just the obvious. It's like when you got a quarterback and Ohio State didn't really take him, like, usually a pretty good indicator.
When you're at that level and and you're trying to beat them, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
it's, hey,
Correct.
It's not even as simple as anything past what we're saying. What you think of Dart's there?
I mean, it's just kind of like it's his brand, right? Just being gutty, and he doesn't make every throw, he doesn't make every play, but man, there's a lot. How many games did they play where you wanted to trade him? Maybe the LSU game, maybe.
They scored in the 50s.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, even the losses, like, I thought it's just so tough. Like, with determining what Milroe does it's not real football for me. So I don't know, but Dart just continues to. He's a winner. Like, it seems like his legacy is like just. It's never the prettiest. It's never the most effective. Like, it's kind of like. I mean this with all due respect. He is what people wanted Bo Wallace to be.
Oh.
Like the gritty, the leader, and all like Jackson actually is that.
Well, in a lot of ways, he's a better version that has Ole Miss on a higher plane. You know what I mean? And Ole Miss probably maximized what Bo made them capable of playing quarterback. And he was a stabilizing thing, and he was there.
I don't know. Ole Miss just won 11 games, and I don't think they have a first-round pick. Bo played with a lot of first-rounders.
Well, that's true. He did get to throw to Dante and Laquan.
Yeah, and Laramie was blocking. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I think again, Dart is not a perfect quarterback. He's probably not an NFL guy, but like, he is the ultimate example of like, you can win a lot of games with him in college football.
He did nothing this year to make me think that just because of his ability to stay in games, to compete, and all that kind of stuff, that, yeah, he can go win on a big stage. Like, that's the thing. Like, some guys, even when you do it, you kind of go, I don't know. But watch him, and he frankly just keeps getting better. I mean, I think he's actually improved throughout the year on a lot of those different things. I mean, because today, I understand what you're saying, but you look at the final stat sheet, and, I mean, it's pretty damn good.
Oh, no, today,
67% for 379 and 3.
No, that's what I'm saying. But also, when I look at how Penn State played them, you bet, like, if the way Penn State played Ole Miss defensively, if you win the game, you better have a big day, because, like, that's just going to be. Look how many times, like, I guarantee you that had to be the most times he saw one-on-one with Trey Harris in probably 2 months. Like, those
would they have been better off just backing up and dropping guys?
Well, probably. Like, now the problem is that I personally would have done that, because I would have said, I'm going to make Ole Miss patiently move the football down the field and try to run it on me. And then when I get into the red zone, I'm going to beef up and make them have to make tougher throws. Now, Ole Miss scored in the red zone. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
To me, Penn State maybe had the better roster, but I think kind of the way you define the years, Ole Miss had the better team. And that's kind of how you would define this season, I think. It's like, maybe Ole Miss wasn't the most talented roster they've ever had, but it was talented enough, and they won a bunch of really tough games. A bunch of one-score games, and then games like today where, I mean, you see, like, the difference between Ole Miss and Penn State today was Ole Miss had two sides. Like, if they needed to get a stop, they were able to get a stop on defense. When they needed to go score, they were able to go score. Penn State could do kind of one of those things, which was they got enough stops, I felt like, early in the game before the game started getting away from them. They got enough stops, but they just could not do enough offensively. Like the touchdown in the first half was, let's be completely honest, like that was bullshit luck.
It was, yeah. Sure.
Like now that happens. Like, and this is also though a credit to Ole Miss and to Kiffin. Like, the guy that's down 31-7 in Nashville, those moments crippled him.
Mm-hmm.
This Ole Miss team didn't let bad luck, bad things, like it didn't end them.
It's the story of their team and really kind of where their program has gone, and it's what's so amazing about the portal period is that they put together this season, they won 11 games because, frankly, they have a more cohesive chemistry on the roster and a more cohesive coaching staff, which was allowed them to win a lot of one-possession games, as you said, and then they were able to extend and take advantage of the weaknesses that Penn State had today. And it's probably why, going back to our conversation we had on Thursday, I think I'm pretty, and I don't think I'm being crazy as far as recency bias off the bowl game. I think I'm pretty comfortable at setting Ole Miss's over-under at 9.5 next season because I look at it and they're going to be more talented. They did this on a year where they were not the most talented team in a lot of games. They weren't more talented than LSU top to bottom or Texas A&M top to bottom. Didn't have the better quarterback in the LSU game. If they can replicate any type of that portal chemistry, I think it's just where they stand with this program because Lane seems to be pretty locked in, and Golding has been a very steady and cohesive force on that defensive side from a coaching standpoint.
No, and where I give Lane credit also with Golding, like oftentimes offensive-minded head coaches, like it seems like they gave Pete a lot of the NIL budget to go out and get guys because you got to also remember the players they went after defensively, like you're talking about some of the most expensive guys on the market. So, there's an acknowledgement. And I felt like a lot of the emphasis on the improving of the roster was the places that I think they have holes. Like they needed more offensive line depth. It looks like they got more offensive line depth. They needed a legitimate game breaker on the defensive front. Like I tip my cap to the young men. They did a great job all year, but like they need somebody. They need a Walter Nolan, and they did all that. And I mean, I don't like you sit there and you think about it's like I don't know what are preseason expectations next year. Like I don't know. I mean, it seems to me, have they ever been top 10 to start? The best they've been was what, the Houston Nut year. What were they, 4?
Yeah. They were 4.
I mean, what? This is going to be preseason, probably top 7 at the worst, right?
At the worst. It's so hard. Because somebody asked that earlier, but the problem is, what do you have from an exposure standpoint for the media to put you ahead of Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, or Texas? That's the problem from cracking the top 5.
And like the only thing, okay, well, is Harbaugh still at Michigan?
Sure. I mean, I get it.
I mean that's the things like, but it seems like to me floor wise, right? They're going to start the season 7th.
Yes, that's correct. No, the expectation next season is playoff. There's no but. That's it.
It's also important to note, like, that's really hard. Like when, like one part of the greatness of Saban is literally they are held to a standard that no other program is held to, and very rarely do they just flat out lay an egg.
Yeah,
and that just doesn't. I mean, look at what was USC preseason this year. I mean, they lost 5
Return the
games.
Heisman Trophy winner, the whole deal.
Yeah, and I believe
LSU they win it. I mean, LSU went a very nondescript 9-3, and everybody had them as the cute pick.
Correct. So
I actually think that's a very good similarity for Ole Miss going into next season overall, not rosters.
No, I know what you're saying because like
the type of LSU buzz that goes into this year that went, hey, yeah, Alabama, Georgia, that's cute. What about Ole Miss? I think that's where they're going into the offseason as.
They are the team that if you get bored with picking Alabama, they're the team that you're going to pick in the West. Well, I guess they're whatever. You know what I mean? Like
And I know they just played and they were beating Penn State and that's a name team and all that stuff, but I do think they're kind of going to be that trendy, interesting media team that they've just sort of prop up all offseason. And maybe justifiably. I don't even mean that as a criticism, but I just think that's
I mean that's the advantage of having Kiffin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not Dion, but it's big.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for super chat. Such a preseason top 8. I agree.
As we talked about the schedule, like Ole Miss has the schedule to get off to like the super fast start, and like you're going to be part of it. Like you like what their first tough game is what, week 6.
I mean, they have Kentucky at home week 5 if you want to count that. They're at Carolina week 6, and they go to Baton Rouge. Barring an upset, they're 6-0 going to Baton Rouge.
There you go.
And then you see what happens.
Yeah.
I mean, that's here's what's interesting too, is somebody made the point in the thing, and look, I'm guilty of this too. I mean, if you said, "Hey, what's Ole Miss's record?" I was predicting 8-4 this year, and I think I said I wouldn't be shocked to see 7-5 before 9-3. I'll eat it and own it. It was a bit of a.
I think I was the same way. I think I said 8-4, but I thought 7-5 was way more likely than 10 wins.
It felt though to me like it was a year where you were trying to just be competitive and set up for next year, and they go and win 11 games. I guess it's that they've won all the coin flips, and I think it's the conversation we're having without not having, even though we've talked in circles about this for weeks, is just. It doesn't seem like they necessarily just had that special won all the coin flips outside of maybe there's actually a method to it when you do it for this long over and over and over again like they do. Because in this portal period, teams are going to collapse culturally inside their roster. So if you can avoid that, you're going to win games just because of the lack of cohesion that goes on inside the league. And I think it's Lane's next challenge is that next year he has a lot of much higher profile portal guys. He's got to keep all those dudes happy. They've got to manage a different set of rosters in a different way next season, and whether he can or can't will actually tell whether they max out these things that we're talking about, because there's no doubt they're going to be more talented. Now, look, they need more offensive linemen. That'll be a focus the rest of the portal season. I think that'll probably start here pretty quick once this thing opens back up in a few days. But that's the next step, is now handling these high-priced free agents with egos and opportunities and those kind of things.
Well, then on top of that, it's like, it's the handling adversity with those guys. You know what I mean? Like when things don't go that way, and does it tear your locker room up? I mean, that's what we normally see. Like, it's not necessarily just like not getting the proper amount of production from those guys. It's what does it do to your locker room when those guys aren't producing and everybody knows? I mean, we're now in an era where everybody knows who the highest paid guy is. There's no secrets anymore. There's no plausible deniability. What does that do to your locker room? And does it tear you up from the inside? I think kind of like what we're talking about is most of these teams that end up disappointing, they largely disappoint because they implode rather than explode.
Does it help that they have so many returners back who can kind of establish that and set it, or is it still all about picking the right portal guys that are capable of buying in? Because frankly, whatever leadership you have or don't have doesn't matter if you don't have guys who are willing to to whatever. And then also,
honestly, I think a lot of it is praying. You know what I mean? Like it's You hope you got the good one. You hope you got the talented one that cares. But like, if this were a science, the NFL would have a much higher draft success rate than it does. You know what I mean?
I think it also helps Ole Miss that they're really, barring a Kentucky weird game, their first really losable game is in week 7, because it allows momentum to get built, where you're not having that early game where you go, hell, now I got to keep these guys together. You kind of wheel the championship mentality, if you will, into it when you get on a roll and actually have a bunch of wins to start the year.
No, I definitely think that's a huge part of it. I think as long as Kiffin is going to have to be, the roster is some blending of our guys, like guys are retaining, guys are ringing in the portal. Like, I think you're going to basically see this exhibition non-conference schedule as long as they can get away with it. You know?
It's the benefit to the 4 non-cons in a row.
Yes.
Like, I know people don't like it, but when you have 2 buys built in, it's not the worst thing in the world.
I know people don't like it, but it's like, hey, man, did anybody think today sucked? How many people, how many Rebs out, show of hands, how many Rebs out there today had a bad day? Seemed like my group chats and everyone that I know, everyone seemed to think today was worth it. And I don't sense that there was a lot of hand wringing from how bad the non-conference was, how uninteresting the non-con was.
It's fair.
I mean, that's the trade-off, you know?
I don't think.
Now, the other jeopardy you have is when you do it like that. I mean, you do also have what happened last year, where you get off to the hot. What were they, 6-0 to start, or something like that?
Yeah, sure. 7-0, 7-0, 8-1.
And then you limp home, and everybody goes, "Well, you were the most fraudulent 7-0 or whatever." Like, yeah, hey man, that's the way the sport works. Like, it's talking about sports, so you do set yourself up for that. But I mean, it really boils down to, like, they had some injuries. Like, but it felt like for a large portion of the important games, they had a lot of guys healthy. It felt like the only game you could really make the argument they were in bad shape was the Alabama games.
They were, and they were. I mean, and they were in an impossible shape in that game. Like, as good as they were down the stretch with injuries, their injuries and where they were made that game almost impossible because you didn't have the ability to win some 1-on-1s and do some things on the outside for the big plays and that kind of stuff. You were never gonna grind it out against them on offense and defense.
No, and you had no continuity. The guys that you were trying to play, like, they hadn't even practiced. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I have not gone over there, Sammy. I can't imagine what brain drain is looking like right now with Auburn's situation going on in their bowl game.
They're just ignoring it, right? I mean, it seemed like he put together a good enough class, but I don't know, that him whining about, oh boy, he put in the freshman. There you go. He's turning to the future.
Well, see, that's, I mean, I know you're reveling, but, like, I actually don't blame that one, right? I mean, what are we doing?
Well, but isn't he bringing Thorne back?
Either way, what are we doing right now?
By the way, I have Florida State team total under 6 first half.
Check it out the stream a little bit.
Your brother's mad at me. Look at your phone. Look at your phone. Your brother came up, and he's mad that I didn't share a bet as sweaty as a team total of under 6 in a bowl game. And I specifically said I took Georgia minus 14 in the first half, and I took Florida State team total under 6.
Reading the stream a little bit, Ryan and Montez, good to see you guys. Ryan, I know you left us now. I'd love to get you on the show at some point, though. I'd love to connect and talk a little running with you at some point if you're up for that. Appreciate seeing you there. No, Jeffrey will admit when he loses a bet. He's willing
yes.
to. Oh yeah, almost kind of revels in it, like letting you know that they didn't go well that day.
I've had some of the most historic. Like, there's nothing I love more than when, like, they'll flash a first time that such and such happened. Like, I had the David Shaw, the first time he ever blew a 28-point lead. I had that bet on the other side. Like, I've had some there was a Clemson Florida State under where I got beat on the last play of the game. Like, and also I have to put in my Twitter profile, I have to put my picks.
Oh, you do?
I link it in my Twitter. Like, what?
Hey, Pete, good point here. Appreciate you being in the stream with us, too. I don't know if you were at the game today. I assume you were. You say you also need to be forged under fire, otherwise you can't be surprised if you let down later. In your opinion, do you think at Wake, at Carolina, Kentucky at home, does that build that? I mean, are those type of games that will do that for you going into next season? Just kind of curious. Because, I mean, it's at least an ACC road trip. I mean, Wake's
are you
not
talking
nothing.
to me or Pete?
I mean, if you'd like to respond, go ahead. I'm just referencing Pete.
Yeah, no. Because I just didn't know if you're. I mean, it's the Gonzaga question.
Yeah.
Gonzaga has to build this non-conference basketball schedule early, and I'm seeing it with like Memphis has to do the same too because the league's so bad that when you get into the tournament, like you haven't really been tested for what 3 months, 4 months. Carly,
what is she upset by?
Literally, probably the wind blew.
Okay.
I mean, there is a legitimate question on that, but like, I think you'd rather have that be the issue than, hey man, we took two losses early and it just fell apart.
And look, 10-2 is the number. If you go 10-2 when you start out the year at numbers at 7 and 8 in the country, you're in the playoff. And you put yourself in a spot where if you're having one of those weird years, you get in at 9-3, depending on the situation.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, obviously it matters. What does everybody else do? But like, I mean, I think you still probably got a decent chance at 9-3.
I mean, it was really a strange year because nobody got upset. That typically doesn't happen unless we're seeing some sort of difference in this new era that's causing it. I don't have an answer for that.
That's what I'm curious about because I think it was like something like the top 15 when the top 15 played either unranked or teams behind them. They were like an astronomical like 120-2. It was something like that. It was. Now that's the question: is that what we're seeing, or was this year an outlier? But my suspicion is that's where this is headed.
You think the better teams are just going to win more games, and it is.
And
what it is.
What I think it's going to be, they're going to win more games, but because of the lack of continuity, they may not win. Like it may not be like the Alabama, the Alabama with Tua, where it's just like whatever the number was, you just laid it first half game, like, and you just kept rolling. Or Burrow's LSU teams, like. But like what we saw is a lot of teams this year that were at the top got scared. It felt like a lot more, but they rarely lost unless they played. It's like they didn't lose unless they played each other.
And if that happens, you're more likely to have it take 10-2.
Well, if you think about this, like the Pac-12, the top two teams, one team goes undefeated, the other team only lost to that team twice. In the Big 12, you got Texas with the weird OU game, but like they didn't lose after that. Georgia in the SEC, Georgia only lost to Alabama. Like, Florida State didn't lose, and I think that's probably what you're going to see more, which is, they're probably only going to lose to each other.
Yeah, I don't think today was meaningless for Ole Miss. I think it was worth several spots on the polls in the preseason, which might matter, and I think it just set a stage that they needed as a program. Kind of wrapping up and going back to the beginning for this real quick. I'm seeing a couple comments in the stream. I mean, look, if they had lost today, it's not like they're not going to have a chance at the playoff or something crazy happened. But when you're discussing these margins and maybe the situation that Jeffrey's talking about right here, going 10-2 versus 9-3, and your odds of getting to the playoff. Your odds are better at 9-3 if you started the year 6 in the country than if you started 16. It's just true. It's mechanics.
Yeah, it's like we can have an argument about whether or not that's appropriate or right, but that's not addressing
the right upsets in the right world. You could lose to LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia and make the playoff.
Correct.
And lose every game that you're equal or better or worse than.
Yeah,
it's just true.
I mean, they got to at a certain point they got to put 12 teams in.
There starts to be a weird benefit of the doubt that you win or lose with these dumb games. It's kind of like right now for Penn State. Look, they had opt-outs. This isn't going to whatever, but there'll be somebody out there that goes, yeah, but Penn State can't win the big game. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we're going to knock them down 2 or 3 spots.
No, it's like, okay, like their Penn State reputation is like, as long as they are better than you, they win. But when they go up against an equal opponent or someone, equal or they're slightly less than, they lose every time.
Any final thoughts? I'll let you get back to watching on the day.
I think it's obviously the greatest season since integration. Oh no. Florida State's inside the red zone. We need Georgia to care. It's the best season since the integration of the sport.
That's true. That's not debatable, by the way.
No, and it's, I don't really care, but it's like this team deserves to be ranked higher than the 10-3 Sugar Bowl team when the polls in. But some of that's relative. But it's, to me, like, this is unquestionably this was the best season since the integration of the sport.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Still sticking with it. You got Michigan and Texas, right?
I got Michigan and Texas.
Okay.
I will say this. Forget the scores. The thing that really stood out to me watching Missouri last night and watching Ole Miss today, the Big Ten teams looked more athletic and looked more like when you watch, like, they're like, oh, you would think that was the SEC team. But the key difference was Missouri's quarterback was better.
Yes.
And he wasn't great. And then Ole Miss's quarterback was infinitely better today.
Yeah, the SEC teams had the better quarterback play, and out of the players that were actually playing in the game, had the better one-on-one matchups on the outside.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Those were too true. Jeffrey, appreciate it, bud. Enjoy the day.
All right, guys, be good.
It was Jeffrey Wright, Brian Rippy going to join me in just a second as well. While I'm waiting on him to do that, I'm just going to leave the screen up. He'll just stick with me half size right now. Some people asking this 2024 schedule for Ole Miss while I'm waiting on Brian. Let me go ahead and tell him he can call in, by the way. Appreciate everybody in the stream. Good activity in the chat. I appreciate that. Yeah, Ole Miss's schedule, for anybody who doesn't have it in front of them or haven't run through this as we're talking about this, I think 9.5 is where Vegas is going to go. And look, maybe it's 10, but my guess is 9.5. Furman, Middle Tennessee, at Wake. So first road game at Wake Forest, September 14th. Georgia Southern. That completes the non-con. They're all four at the beginning of the year. And then Kentucky at home, at South Carolina, at LSU. Then they get a bye week, first of two bye weeks. Bye week, Oklahoma at home, at Arkansas. Traditionally a very tricky game that would be. It would be sandwiched in between Oklahoma and Georgia. It would be on the road. Ole Miss has not played well in Fayetteville. It would be all those kind of things right there. And then another bye week. Then Georgia, another bye week at Florida. And then much to Lane's chagrin, that at Florida is 5 days, at least as of right now, prior to Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. So you're talking about, 3 games are on paper, Ole Miss has 3 coin flips. And they have games they're going to be projected to win and potentially not coin flips beyond that. When you look at it from that standpoint, that's why I'm saying this with the over-unders. You're talking about 3 games really in question, barring a game that Lane loses that he's not supposed to, and he hasn't traditionally done that for the most part. And then you're talking about 2 of those at home, where Ole Miss is, 20-2 out of the last whatever? Something like that? Brian, how are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. We're good. Your Wi-Fi is probably a little fuzzy because your camera is not in view, so I'm just going to hold you out of the screen for now. But as long as you can hear me, we're good. Yeah, you were breaking up pretty badly there.
Am I good now?
That was better. Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
You were in Mercedes-Benz Stadium today. I guess tell me a little bit about the crowd, the environment. Just kind of take me through that side of things today.
Very At this point during the game, like Ole Miss, I thought Ole Miss had probably a couple more sections filled than Penn State did, but it was, I mean, as much as we talk about these bowl games being meaningless exhibitions, there's still something to these New Year's Six games. I know they're going to lose meaning and whatever's going to happen in the next version of college football in the 12-team playoff. But I mean, it was a fun environment. It felt like an important football game that mattered, and I thought Ole Miss showed up pretty well, and Penn State did too. It was just kind of a fun football game all around, and I guess it couldn't have gone better for the Rebels.
What'd you just pop open there?
High Noon, complimentary of the Michael Portner Sports Group.
Do you want to say any more about that at the moment or no?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sitting at the Ritz-Carlton. Not sure how I was allowed, but
hey, listen. Hey, I'm going to make an executive decision here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to hang up, and I'm going to call you on your phone if you're good with that. It's breaking up, and that way we can just bypass this if you're cool with that.
Yep, that works.
Okay, hang up, and I'll call you right here. I'm going to make an executive decision there, Brian, breaking up a little bit, so we're going to make this easy on both of us. Give me a second, and I will get him dialed in on that. So we're just on the fly, trying to make it easier on me, make it easier on you guys as well, because I know you guys probably were not hearing him very well either. So it's all good. We can make the call. We can get him on the air. So give me a second, and we'll get that done. Okay, give me 1 second. Y'all just hang out. I know it's bad pod, as I always say, but I'm having to do a few things I was not expecting. I was not thinking I was going to have to pull the deal on my side.
Y'all hear me okay?
Yep, all good now. You hear him? You hear me? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying it was on your end, but it was really fuzzy, and I just thought this would be better than us trying to talk over each other because there was a bit of a lag.
Yeah, absolutely, all good. No, I was just saying it felt like a very important football game, and it went well for Ole Miss. It was very, well-filled. Stadium was almost a sellout, and it was fun. That was a lot of fun, and like I said, it couldn't have gone better for Ole Miss.
So you started to say that. Where are you right now? What's going on with your location?
I am at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Atlanta, and my close friend Michael Portner has a suite at the Ritz, and he is signing a couple of Ole Miss players to professional, agency agreement contracts after that. So I'm sitting here in the suite at the Ritz trying to figure out how to act like I belong in such an arena.
Are we willing to say who those people are yet, or are we waiting on announcements on those?
To hell with it. I could get in trouble, but I don't give a shit. It's Victor Kern and Jeremiah G. Baptiste.
Okay. There you go on that one. Kern, speaking of, I think he's an interesting guy at the next level because I'm not going to pretend that I'm some scout or know anything from a draft standpoint, but when we look at this season and what Ole Miss got out of certain guys, and we're going to talk about the impact of Trey Harris and all these different dudes and what they did, and it's all very legitimate. But considering the offensive line struggles, Victor Kern has the chance to be one of those top couple transfers that really changed Ole Miss's season because especially when Williams was out, Pettis was out, Kern's ability to come in, play left tackle, play right tackle, move around, kind of do whatever Ole Miss needed. I mean, it sort of has that same effect that, way back on a way different level because this team just won 11 games, and I get that team won six games. But kind of what like Pierce Burton or some of those dudes did. I mean, he's somebody they were able to plug in and move around that without him, they would have been kind of screwed up front.
I agree with every part of that. I mean, it was one of those things where they started two freshman tackles last year in Williams and Pettis, and then you got into this season. It was like, okay, Kern's playing over them, and then He never really relinquished his spot. He was pretty versatile. He wasn't a perfect left tackle by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't remember leaving a football game that Ole Miss lost and the two that they lost or games that they struggled in thinking, man, they were really struggling on the left side of the offensive line. He was just kind of a quiet transfer from Washington. He's a very good kid, comes from a very good family that wanted to up his pro stock, and I think he accomplished that this year. I think you're exactly right. He left this game today. He actually ran right by us into the tunnel, and I was looking at Michael like, hey, is your guy okay? Like, what's going on here? He comes back out with his helmet on, and I was like, okay, it'll be interesting to see if he goes back in the game. He goes back in the game, and it was like nothing happened, right? They put Jeremy James at right tackle and Williams at left tackle for a series and a half or so, and then he comes back out, and they were fine. I agree. I think it was one of those things, even when you went into the season with Williams and Pettis as your tackles, you had Pettis go down. What do you do if you don't have a Victor Kern? Like, what does that look like for an offensive line to the end of the year? It kind of became reshuffled and was really makeshift for the last 3 games of the year. I agree. I think Victor Kern is an unsung hero on this Ole Miss football team that just won 11 games.
So give me a little color, as early on Penn State had some momentum because of their line play on both sides of the ball. As you said, a pretty even split crowd, but Ole Miss had a few more. Ole Miss definitely had a majority of the crowd, at least over more than a 50-50 split. But as the game started kind of getting away, it felt like Ole Miss got pretty raucous. I mean, did Penn State kind of hang in? Did they go to the tunnels at some point? I mean, what was sort of fan environment movement as the game went on?
No, I would say that pass that I was texting you about where Ole Miss had just scored and they had kind of pinned Penn State back a little bit, no pun intended, and the Aller kind of tried to scramble and then threw like a little bit of a flutter ball through that was like, how did that get intercepted? And all of a sudden it was like a 77-yard gain, and they were down by the goal line. Really, up to that point, I thought Ole Miss kind of dominated the game, and I thought the crowd reflected that as well for the most part. And I don't know. I mean, I defer to you in that point too. Is like the first 2 series of this game, Ole Miss got dominated up front in that first series there on offense. And then Penn State was gaining, about 5.5, 6 yards a carry every time they ran the football. I still, for the life of me, don't understand why they threw the football in that 3rd and 4 by the goal line on their first series. And then something flipped, and I can't really put my finger on it. You would probably have a better idea of watching the game on television from the vantage point that I had. What do you think changed in that game? I thought it was a schematic masterclass from Kiffin and Weiss. I mean, if you'd have told me that Ole Miss only had 146 yards rushing and averaged 3 yards a rush, but somehow averaged 6.5 yards a play, I don't really know how to explain that other than the fact that they really just schooled them schematically. And again, you'd have a better vantage point. Well, what do you think changed after the first 2 series of the game?
Pete, you're hanging out with us. Give me an idea there on the stream. I mean, is it adjustments? What was the movement there? Was it simply getting through the script and they had things that worked and utilized one-on-one matchups? What'd you see, Pete? You're a football guru. Look, I thought I was with you. Look, I don't know exactly what changed, but I thought that it was really interesting early on that I told Jeffrey they didn't have a straight run play or an RPO that resulted in a run for maybe the first 2 series. And they were clearly trying to throw open, work on mismatch in the passing game, protect enough to hit some short throws and do some things, and then soften it up where they could run the football. And they were just counting bodies. And when you do that and the matchup says throw, you throw, and you do the kind of things from how to justify all of the RPOs. But their ability to take advantage of the one-on-ones, to get the ball out ahead of blitzes, and slow them down enough to utilize things in the speed game and on the outside were really masterful. I mean, it's what I said earlier, is that I give Lane and his offense so much credit for not overthinking, because you said it too. I mean, the story of this game from the Penn State side is that they could not throw the football, and early on, when it was still a game and they still had possible momentum, they just kept running. They wouldn't just keep running it over and over and over until you stopped it. I mean, at one point, one of the running backs was averaging 7.8 a carry and one was averaging 6.6 a carry. And then after that, they start throwing it, and they let Aller kind of mess them up, and they do all those things. Lane doesn't do that. When he has mismatches, he just rides them until they go away. And that's something that, for whatever reason, that doesn't always happen.
You're right, and it was very clearly a game plan that they were wanting to stick to and they were patient with, right? I mean, you texted me. I think Ole Miss was on the 3rd drive of the game, and I just received a text from you that was like, they haven't run a run play yet. I'm sitting there thinking, have they? And then, of course, like right on cue, they run Judkins, and it was the 3rd drive of the game before they actually ran a run play. So it was very clear, Penn State has a very fierce defensive front. It seemed like to me it was very clear that Kiffin and the staff was like, look, we're not going to make our hay running the football on this team. We're going to need to do exactly what you said, kind of find soft matches amongst Penn State secondary and just stick with it. And it didn't look great, like I said, for the first 2 series of the game, but credit to them, they stuck with it, and they ended up really kind of schooling them on that. I mean, look, as much as I would love to credit the Caden Prieskorn performance to appearing on the Rippy Wright's podcast, I don't think it was an accident that he had like 13 catches for 2 touchdowns and should have been 3 if one wasn't called back today. They identified something in that secondary and in the second level with as fierce of a first level as Penn State has, and they kind of dominated them because of that. Again, they ran for 146 yards at 3.5 yards a carry and won the game by what should have been 21 points.
Yeah, I was going to give you a chance to brag on your boy there. I mean, Caden Prieskorn goes for whatever the hell it ended up being today. He has, 10 catches for 160-something and 2. I mean, and half those catches seemed like they were with one hand. I mean, what got into your boy?
I don't really know. I did. I was diving into the resources of the Prieskorn camp, and I was told that had he not appeared on my podcast in December, today would not have been possible. So whatever you want to make of that. But on a serious note, Ole Miss aren't they a little bit fortunate in a selfish sense that he was injured for the first 3 games of the year? Because look, he was right up. I mean, you covered fall camp and all that. They were pretty adamant that he was going to be a core part of this offense, and he gets hurt the week before the first game. He misses the first game. He comes back for Alabama. He wasn't really a practice guy. I mean, when I say practice guy, he didn't really practice at all until the Auburn game. And so he never really got into a rhythm. So he became this seldom-used tight end that was this very large target, that was a very big weapon. But from my vantage point, and he even admitted this a little bit when I talked to him on that podcast, on a serious note, like, had he been a guy that was just healthy for 12 games, I'm not sure they get him back next year. Do you think the same thing, or do you differ on that?
You would know far better than me. Frankly, you would be pretty well sourced, even though if he hasn't come out and said it. So I would never argue with your thought there. But no, I think you're exactly right. And look, I know he didn't get a great grade, and that factored into him coming back. But, look, some of that goes for Trey Harris, too. Does he make a different decision if he stays healthy for 12 games and has 1,300 yards catching instead of 975 or whatever it ended up being? I think he finished just shy of 1,000 for the year. But, I mean, we're talking about 2 guys that are a huge reason why Ole Miss is going to go into next season 5, 6, 7 in the country, whatever the hell it is, because you look at their skill players and barring something unexpected as far as what that retention looks like, I mean, we're talking about a pass duo, or not a duo, a tandem situation there that's Prieskorn, Harris, Watkins, Juice Wells, Deion Smith, and I didn't even mention Aiden Williams. I mean, the matchups are really ridiculous on what they're going to have ability to do there. Hudson Wolf has actually flashed a little. He got a catch today. I like his game if he can stay healthy. But Caden's ability to do everything from that tight end position, because he's a good run blocker too, it's a game changer. And I think you're right. I think a guy who had a little more experience at the Power 5 level that stays healthy, he might be making a different decision today versus what he is, which is coming back and being a key reason why Ole Miss has such expectations for 2024.
And you bring that part of it about it next year. I mean, they add Juice Wells. They get Trey Harris back. I mean, look, we've seen Lane very much be active in the portal for the last couple of years, and a lot of guys have hit, and they've had a lot of important pieces. But to me, Trey Harris, and this is something that I realized today, something that stood out to me today, whether it was one of his 2 catches on the sideline or that one that he caught that was almost a touchdown, they've had guys that have made a difference on the football team that they've gotten through the portal. But he strikes me as the first, holy hell, this guy's a massive difference maker that could be an all-SEC guy that they got out of the portal that is now coming back next year. He, particularly, like you mentioned, with Deion Smith and Juice Wells and Prieskorn coming back, he's going to be an issue next year in the SEC. He is unbelievable. And he, to me, is the greatest example of, you can find difference makers in the portal, because he is absolutely that.
And they liked him so much on his buy-in. It wasn't necessarily even just what he did on the field, but they thought his attitude and all played. They thought he would be a chemistry guy, somebody who wouldn't give up if things early in the season didn't go his way. And he showed that because he gets injured, comes back, ends up throwing up the big game today. I think Harris ended up with 7 catches, 134 maybe, something like that. By the way, I love this big brain thing on Twitter, and if you're in the stream, I appreciate you being there, but I'm still going to make fun of you. I had somebody upset because of the late game play calling on Twitter because they didn't make sure that Harris got his 1,000 yards receiving. Dude ended up with like 10 targets on 134 yards today. They didn't exactly go away from him. It just kind of happened the way it did, bud.
Look, man, the Grove Collective is churning and burning, but they are not doing yardage incentives yet, unless you've heard something that I haven't.
Well, that is technically illegal, but
that is technically illegal, and they operate by the letter of the law, as we've written about. So, maybe get over the 1,000-yard thing. He'll be back next year.
Yeah, receiving today, Prescorn 10 for 136, Harris for 7 for 134, Dayton Wade 3 for 61. As mentioned a couple times in the stream, I see Luke mentioning it, and Pete did as well. Caden Lee with a pretty nice day today, even despite only some modest stats. 3 for 29, but he played in place of Watkins, who had been dealing with a hamstring injury. They had Watkins back there to return punts because it wouldn't be an Ole Miss team if they didn't have a lack of depth catching punts. But, for the most part, pretty even, pretty successful day there at the entire time. Rushing 34 for 106 for Judkins, and Judkins was up to 129 or 131 prior to some of that crazy stuff late. He actually had a much better day than 34 for 106.
I was like, if we have a small gripe with this team, do you have a theory on the punt returning thing? Like, Watkins broke his hand, and they still stuck him back there during the regular season to return punts. He's clearly hurt today. Why is he the only dude that can catch punts? It's like, do we have any sort of intel on this?
I don't know. I'm wondering if it's a national problem more than I realize, and it's just that I don't pay attention in that way. So if guys muff punts, I'm not looking at it. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. I don't have an answer for you on that one.
I'll flip it back on you for a second. I haven't obviously watched any of the post-game stuff with Lane, and obviously I didn't get to watch the television broadcast. But as Ole Miss enters with a ton of momentum next year, what did you kind of, for the lack of a better phrase, what was kind of the general vibe of Ole Miss beating the hell out of Penn State on national television? What was kind of the sense you got heading into next year?
Oh, I told Jeffrey, I think they're about to be a media darling for how many ever months. I think Ole Miss is going to be this offseason's version of LSU going into this season. Maybe Texas in some ways going into this season. I mean, I think you're talking about the top 5 in a lot of ballots. Look, I don't know if they're going to finish top. If they're going to start the year top 5, but I think they're going to be picked in the top 5 by a lot of individual ballots. I think they're the team, as Jeffrey said, who, if you just don't want to be boring and go Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, they're going to be right there with Texas on the next teams that you're talking about to potentially disrupt this entire thing. I mean, it's what's so fascinating. I read Ole Miss's schedule right before you got on air with us, and I just think that there is some interesting dynamics of where they're starting, the way they're probably getting off the season to start, the big start they're probably going to have with the first 6 games being very winnable. I mean, you're talking about a really successful, high-profile deal for a program between now and, again, they can lose games. I mean, I don't want to put just W's on the side of the scoreboard and call it a day, but potentially barring upsets between now and whenever that game kicks off in Baton Rouge and, frankly, almost October.
And it's a media darling that can back it up. With the reinforcements coming, they're going to be – look, I know I got shit about this on the message board to keep asking the question, like, is Ole Miss a good football team? Clearly they're a good football team, but, like, they were kind of a beat-up football team toward the end of the season. And maybe the most surprising part about what happened today was the fact that they scored so many points on what was supposed to be, and I think still is, a pretty elite Penn State defense and a very, very elite, even without Chop Robinson, defensive front for Ole Miss. And I think that showed itself in the first drive of the game where it was like, oh my God, are these guys going to gain 300 yards of offense? Like, how is this going to go today? They did that today, and they have the reinforcements on the way. You're right. They're going to be a media darling, but I think they can back it up with what they have coming. And again, I keep asking you questions on your own show, but like, you've been around this longer than I have. I've texted a couple of people about this. Where will this rank? I was a college student in 2014. I won't pretend to say I followed the program like I do in like a reporter journalistic sense or whatever version of covering the team. Where will this rank in terms of the most anticipated Ole Miss football season since you've been around it? Because to me, it's one of one.
It's one of one. I mean, the only even comparisons are 2008 going into 2009 because that 2009 team was ranked 4th in the country in the preseason. That was a team on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It's a weird year because in hindsight, that team lost some games. That team never should have been there. That was a team that was very weak mentally in some ways and didn't handle it well. If you remember, that was the Houston Nut that was going to have I think it was True TV. They were going to do like this Inside the NFL type documentary on the team, and then Nut shut it down right before it was supposed to be aired, and things just didn't go well. They lose the game in South Carolina, and it sort of, they ended up still in an Access Bowl, or not an Access Bowl, I guess a Cotton Bowl back then. There was no Access Bowls. But it never really got going there at the same time. And then in 15, look, that was Laramie's junior year, Robert's junior year, Laquan's junior year. But people were excited about Chad Kelly, but they didn't know Chad was going to be as good as Chad ended up being. You were replacing the quarterback. You know what I mean? So that would be a possibility too. But going into it where, no, the expectation is to just go win to compete for a title. It's 15 or now, but it's now. It's not, and it's not even really debatable. 15 is a clear number 2, but it's behind what we're about to get into because it's not, hey, if things go right. It's Ole Miss is going to have to lose football games it's not expected to lose to miss the playoff next season. That's the truth. That's where it is. That is the expectation, and that's Ole Miss's deal as a program. Is look, this is a checklist game again. When we talked about this earlier. Getting that 11th win, I think, look, in the sense of tangible things, does not matter. Not really. Sorry, guys. I have a cold. I'm kind of trying to fight through it. I apologize for my pronunciation a little bit. Does that really matter? No. But a program that's on the rise, you need to get a season where you have 11 wins. Okay, check. You need to win an Access Bowl. Again, check. You need to beat a prominent program in an Access Bowl. There's a lot of big difference from a exposure standpoint on beating Penn State in a game like this, even with the opt-outs and all that crap, and the number 1 defense in the country versus beating Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State didn't carry that same type of appeal. It was a Big Ten team, the clear Big Ten number 3. In a way, it was a postseason game with preseason implications. On the winner of this game was going to probably be ranked higher in the preseason going into next year and be the top Big Ten or SEC sleeper team to really make a run. And by Ole Miss handling that game the way they did, just simply from a scoreboard standpoint, and putting up 500 yards of offense, they are going to go into next season as the winner of that little competition. It's going to be Ole Miss and Missouri and then Penn State, probably in that order, in that little game of where you go into the preseason. So no, Ole Miss is going to spend 9 months and then even longer as they win games. Absolutely a team that's just simply expected to go 10-2 or so, or whatever you want to make it, make the playoff, and then compete for a title in whatever means you want to say it. Because, look, if you make the playoff, you are competing for a title.
We talk about what you can take from a game like this where, we were texting about it during the week, like, hey, we just need them to win so we have something to talk about. Like, what are we going to talk about on this post-game show that we're doing now if they lose? Like, you're right, it doesn't really matter, but if they win, it makes the conversation a lot easier. And I talked about that with Weldon on the podcast earlier in the week, and I mentioned one thing, and look, I get a million things wrong, but I was like, look, if Ole Miss marches the football up and down the field on this Penn State defense, that will be with what they have returning next year. One of the things I would file away of, like, okay, maybe with Priestcorn healthy and Harris healthy and all these different guys, that might be something I would actually file away for next year. If you're actually talking about one thing you could take away toward next year is if they really just march the football up and down the field on this Penn State defense, I would file that away of like, okay, maybe they've kind of hit this moment. And they scored 38 points on a team where they weren't winning the matchup up front. And sometimes they were getting dominated up front. They just kind of schemed their way around it. And like heading into next year where you have reinforcements on the way, I find that to be a fascinating dynamic with this team. And we've seen Lane as the up-and-coming guy, as, building the program. You've won 10 games twice. How do you think they'll handle expectations as the hunted next year, for the lack of a better phrase? This is now playoff or bust. How do you think they will handle a bunch of new dudes in the room, a bunch of very talented guys in the room? But now it's not, oh, can you go win 10 games when we told you in the preseason win 7.5 or 8? How do you think they'll handle the fact that this is playoff or this is a failure?
I think they're going to relish it in a way. Now, look, how
I
they
do.
handle it, that's different because we don't know the answer to that yet. We don't know what all these portal additions are going to be like. We don't know what that's going to look like yet. So I don't know. But Jackson Dart almost kind of craves that, in my opinion. You know him better than I do, but I mean, I think it's a situation where, frankly, Dart almost gets offended that he's not considered a hunter, if you will, or a hunted. Like, and I don't mean chip on the shoulder necessarily, but you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, 100%.
kind of feeds off that. Like, kind of wants to be a front runner a little bit. I think they have that case. I think they have enough veterans that they're in a pretty good shape as far as that goes. Because that can definitely derail some teams. And we mentioned 2009. I think that's one of the things they didn't handle very well. I think it's absolutely one of the things 2009 did not handle well was being the hunter instead of the hunter. But
I think you're exactly right. And they return enough of the nucleus to where I don't think that's going to be a problem. I don't think there's going to be cohesion problems, right? That's the whole storyline. It's like, well, you bring these guys in the portal or they're going to be chemistry issues. They bring enough guys back next year off a team that had a ton of new faces, and they melded them together and they liked them next year. And now you're just adding on top of it. You're not really reshaping the whole roster. You're adding more guys on top of what were a lot of portal guys that came here and decided they want to stay here for another year. I don't really have any sort of concern about cohesion or chemistry or mental toughness or any of that with this team. It's just going to be a matter of, I mean, again, there's a fine line, there's a thin margin in college football when you get a 12-game regular season with a 12-team playoff. How does that actually end up? But I really don't have any concerns of, like, will this team wilt the first time they lose a football game? I really I think that conversation needs to be put on the back burner.
Pete has a good point, too. He says the program will handle it as Lane handles it. We've seen the difference in home field product based on the difference we see in Lane. Lane is going to be more engaged in a way because, look, Lane's mode and goal is to win games and win championships. Frankly, he gets a little bored once the stakes lower. He's a lot more locked in when things really matter. And I get the whole Alabama thing with him. That's a different conversation. In general, you get the best Lane when there are stakes on things. So I think Lane's a better coach actually coaching from the front like that.
Oh, 100%. And Alabama's not on the schedule next year. We don't have to do that whole thing of what does this season look like post-Alabama when Lane makes that into a circus. They're not on the schedule next year. You can go 10-2 next year and make the playoff. Now, I think one of the things of Ole Miss next year is, like, can you somehow get to 11-1 and, like, host a playoff game? I don't know how that's going to look. But you're right. When the stakes matter and Lane doesn't get in his own head with whatever side storyline or whatever it may be, you get the best version of Lane. And I think the way the schedule shakes out next year, you're going to get the best version of Lane for 12 football games. There is no, oh, Hugh Freeze, they're going to Auburn. Is he going to make that into a media circus? Oh, he handles the Alabama game differently because Alabama's on the schedule. There's none of that next year. They need to go win 12 football games to improve their seeding as much as possible to get to the college football playoff and maybe host a game.
Yeah.
If that's a thing. I don't even know how that works. Do you even know how the rules work for this shit next year?
As in what part of it?
Are we gonna have home games? How is this going to work?
Yes, the first round of playoff games are at home. You have 4 byes, and then you're going to have 8 teams with four teams hosting 4 teams. That's correct.
This is what Lane thought he could do at Ole Miss, and I know he's flirted with other jobs, but I mean, I guess for the lack of a phrase, we are going to get peak Lane Kiffin in his best version next year, in my opinion.
Yeah, if you finish 5 through 8 in the country at the end of the regular season, you will host a playoff game.
What do you think that'll mean for a program like that? We have this new version of college football, this new era. We've covered the Grove Collective part of it. What do you think it'll be like next December when Ole Miss is playing a December football game in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium? Again, I'm not guaranteeing. I'm just saying if it happens. What do you think that will mean for the program in that moment?
Oh, I mean, there aren't words. It's the biggest game in program history, and it's validation of everything you have done. I mean, that's where it's the thing with today. I mean, look, we're talking so much about next year, and I get why we are. But as I mentioned a minute ago, and how Jeffrey and I were talking about, you guys, I mean, and fans, you guys enjoy it. You deserve it. You've bought into this. You just finished off the best season since integration. Period. You just had the best football season you have had since the 1960s. And you are expecting a season next year to be as good or better in that standpoint. And that only happened because of really smart leadership that hired Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin buying into the program and believing he could win. Hiring assistants. Hiring Pete Golding. Pete buying in for family and personal reasons. The administration backing it, making the right decisions with the Grove Collective, from William Liston to Walker Jones, all the way down, from the big money boosters like David Nutt and Crimes Pittman and and Bill and Tyler Jordan and those guys, all the way down to the subscribers who pay whatever it is a month and are kind of the infantry for the Grove Collective. I mean, in all seriousness, it's a pretty elaborate plan that took a lot of right decisions that paid off today. You beat Penn State. You didn't just beat somebody. You played in the Peach Bowl and beat Penn State, and it was, I mean, it's almost kind of a 4-year process that's gotten Ole Miss to where it got today. And this is a team and a program that, I mean, you're probation 5-6 years ago. You couldn't even go to a bowl game. I mean, I don't know. I guess I feel like we look forward sometimes so much that we don't really stop and go, holy shit. Like, at the number of things that have gone on to get to today, forget tomorrow, but today, 11-2. You lost to Alabama and Georgia, no shame in that. Beat everybody else, and beat Penn State today. I don't know. I think sometimes you just kind of stop and, not necessarily smell the roses, but it's not always about tomorrow. It's a lot about what's actually been accomplished already to this point.
Remarkably well said. Ole Miss fans should enjoy this day. And you talk about the buy-in and everyone rowing in the same direction. And in this NIL era, like, you can't, like, at the fan before this, when it's bagmen and it's trying to get the recruits and it's trying to catch up with Alabama or whoever else is at the top of college football at the time, everything was so black market, behind the scenes. Like, if you're a fan, don't get me wrong, like, you're going to be invested, you're going to be emotionally invested. Now it's more tangible. I sat in front of a guy today who had a Grove Collective hat on. And I just sat there. He's probably around my age. And clearly, I assume if he has a hat on, he probably donates. I don't mean to make any assumptions about that. But, like, that guy, whatever he donates a month, he's donating that, and he's seeing the product on the field. Like, I had a guy that stopped me on the way out of the stadium. Was like, "You guys doing a show tonight?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll probably hop on. Hopefully Chase won't kick me off before things get too sideways." But people like that feel like they're I say feel like they are invested in this, and they are the cogs in the machine that are making this happen. Look, NIL is a mess. There's so much other things that we can talk about how this sport needs to be legislated. But the one beauty of NIL, if you have fan buy-in and you have the guy donating $10 a month to the Grove Collective or $10,000 a month, everyone tangibly now has skin in the game. And when you see the product on the field, that's only going to increase the buy-in because you literally put your own hard-earned money and your own skin in the game. And I felt like I sensed that today in the Ole Miss crowd. And I'm probably getting a little too Pollyanna with that. But I'm just looking around at people that I know are donors to the Grove Collective, and they're watching them win their 11th game, and they played a part in this. And they played in part of the reinforcements coming next year, if that makes any sense.
Oh, no, 100%. You're exactly right. I know you got good stuff going on. I've got Neil on the line now, Brian. Appreciate it. I'll shoot you a text when we get done, and we'll coordinate how this thing goes. But go enjoy the next hour.
Sounds like a plan. Y'all have a happy New Year.
Mr. McCready, how are you?
I am good. How are you? I'm loading something super fast. Can you hear me? Hold on.
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
I'll get you put into the screen in a second. Brian was having some internet trouble, so I had him on Skype instead of the eCam.
All right, I'm almost there. I'm uploading some video.
Georgia now up 35-3 on Florida State in the Orange Bowl. 3:12 left in the second quarter of that one. Quite the blowout in play in Miami. And then in Nashville, is that still going on? Is that game still happening, or have they done yet? Let's see. They're in commercial break, so I don't have a final on the Auburn, Maryland ass-kicking that is going on there.
I'm good.
You're good now? All right.
Yep.
Listen, while I'm getting you into the picture, I guess we saw the game. We've talked plenty about it. We'll come back to that. Tell me about postgame. What did Lane say? What did anybody else say? What news, mood, color, whatever you want to say?
Let's see. They kind of did it in a way that Lane was in one room with Caden Prieskorn and Jared Ivey, and then they brought Quinshawn and Jackson and Trey Harris and Dejon Anthony to another room. I went to that room because I didn't trust other people to get what we needed from those guys. You know, I knew there would be people that would be asking the obvious questions of and that kind of thing. So I got that, and then I got to the end of lanes where you couldn't really ask anything because you didn't know what had already been asked. But I mean, the mood was what you would expect. Very, very happy, satisfied. You know, Lane talked about they're building something. They're just getting started, that this is kind of the beginning, which is sort of the sense that I had kind of all week. And today it's what I wrote my column about. You know, we asked Jackson and Quinshawn about their futures and got the same vague, no answers that we've been getting all week, which is what I expected. Reporting 101 for people who don't understand it. You ask because you have to ask, even though you pretty much know that's probably going to be the answer that you're going to get. So yeah, we did all that. And, you know, I mean, a lot of talk about what they achieved, a lot of talk about the history of what they achieved, the first time in program history to win 11 games. And obviously finishing in the top 10, maybe even pushing the top 5. And then a whole lot of talk already about next year and what the goal is for next season and the team that they're building for next year, which on paper is going to be significant, assuming that Jackson comes back and assuming that Quinshawn comes back, a team that next season on paper is going to be significantly better than the one that just went 11-2.
I told Brian a second ago, I think right before you came on, the story is next season, but it's almost hindering the fact of everybody stopping to think about how far this damn thing has come and just what they just did. I mean, 11-2, went over Penn State today. Call it what you want to call it. Having the season where you beat every team you're supposed to beat, up and down, period. You potentially beat one or two you weren't supposed to beat. You maximize in every day. And the build off of the day that Lane Kiffin was hired, the administration making that decision, the Grove Collective coming on, getting out early, all the things that happened with Liston and Walker and fan buy-in and Lane being willing to pass off so much to Pete and the things that have happened. I mean, there's a lot of shit that's going on that's going well for Ole Miss to get to this day. And I kind of started waxing poetic, and I didn't necessarily mean to, but I do think, and look, it's the story. My next question is going to be about next season. But at the same time, like, there does have to be a little bit of a pause and go, holy crap. Like, it's a remarkable turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stunning turnaround in a really short period of time. It's only been a little more 4 years. Like 4 years and I guess 4 years and like half a month since Lane Kiffin got the job at Ole Miss. And you throw in the reality that the whole pandemic thing happened 4 months in and really completely impacted their ability to recruit and kind of get any traction that whole 2021 season even that everybody talks about. And as you said, people kind of wax poetic about that year. They couldn't recruit during it because you had all the mandates and the stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to really put into words kind of how they have gotten where they've gotten. It's been, I mean, I feel like I wrote this in 2019 before they hired him. He just felt like a perfect fit, and he was. And the Golding hire was huge. But, like, I don't really think the impact of that is going to be felt until next season. I don't know. I mean, I just watched it, and I've seen people on Twitter do the whole Penn State's not any good. I disagree completely. I couldn't disagree more, in fact. I think Penn State is good. I watched Penn State probably play 6 times this season. I know some guys opted out, stuff like that. But, no, Penn State's a good team.
That's a playoff team with Jackson Dart at quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got weapons. The two running backs are good. They're very, very explosive up front on defense. Jackson I don't know if it's Jackson or not. Number 11, Abdul. I can't think of his Abdul Carter. He's terrific. He's a stud. He would walk into Ole Miss's defense right now today and be the best player on the defense.
Yeah.
They have some guys in the secondary. James Franklin, for all the stuff people say about him, he's a hell of a coach. Look at his record. And Ole Miss just dominated them in the second half. Just dominated them, and that's not the kind of thing that you'd expect to see. I mean, Ole Miss just won 11 games with, kind of a makeshift offensive line, and a. This isn't completely fair, but at times kind of what was a ragtag defense in spots. And like you said, they won every game they were supposed to win. They won close games. They found ways to come back in games. They lost at Alabama, a team that is about to play for a national semifinal. They lost to Georgia, a team that probably should be playing a national semifinal right now. It's a remarkable story. It really is, and it's kind of one that. And I wrote this, and then I kind of felt validated when he said it right away. This did not feel like the culmination of a story. It sort of felt like a springboard.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, that's why so much has been focused. Because I got to ask this question. I don't know if it was in the stream or from Brian. Where do you put the 2024 anticipation? And I think in hindsight, we forget how anticipated that 2009 season was because of how it ended up going. But that doesn't match this. I mean, for either you or I, since we've been covering this program, this is going to be an off season unlike any more, because it's not even going to be this kind of sleeper what if thing. Ole Miss is going to be expected to be in the playoff. They're going to get a lot of top 5 votes going into the preseason for next year, and they've got this soft schedule, soft relative to the SEC, that's going to allow them to sort of get acclimated to each other in a way before their hardest games even come on the schedule. I mean, it's sort of the perfect accumulation of all those things. Neil just jumped off. I assume he will come back in a second, clearly having some technical difficulties. No big deal there. We'll get him back on the horn. There he is. There you go.
Sorry about that. Wi-Fi's been a little in and out. It'll just kind of fade for a second, then it'll come back for an hour and fade. There's a lot of people in the building that are using it.
Jay Young, thanks for Super Chat. Says, hot take incoming. Ole Miss and hire Lane Kiffin if it wasn't for the rant. Thanks again for the job all you guys do. Thanks for the Super Chat on that one. What I was saying was 2009 gets overlooked, but this is by far the most anticipated offseason that Ole Miss has had since you or I have been around, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean,
because of the playoff.
Yeah. I mean, the playoff, the addition of Texas and Oklahoma, and then, I mean, look, the fact is, and I had some time to think about this when I was working on my column. If you're listing, and it's early, it's December the 30th. There's some time to perfect the list, but if you're listing national title contenders for 2024, you don't say too many schools before you say Ole Miss. I mean, you say Alabama, of course, Georgia, they've earned that.
Michigan,
probably Michigan,
depending on Harbaugh.
Depending on Harbaugh, probably Texas. That's
it.
And then after that, that's probably it. I mean, maybe you get into the conversation about Oregon or Washington or Utah or maybe some teams about to have a big portal load that they bring in a bunch of guys. I don't really know what Florida State's situation is for next season. Ohio State, depending on what they do at quarterback, because they're Ohio State and they're going to have athletes everywhere, although their record against the SEC is the 1-13 thing was wow. Like, I didn't realize that. But yeah, it's Ole Miss. I mean, Ole Miss, if you were doing a preseason poll right now for next season, I mean, I think you'd put them fifth. I think if you do a postseason poll, it's going to be the 4 teams that are ahead, and then probably Georgia, and then Ole Miss. I mean, Ole Miss is probably going to finish the season ranked number 6 in the AP poll.
You think they jump Missouri?
I don't know.
Optically, Ole Miss is going to be higher in the preseason next year than Missouri, for sure. I think that's what Ole Miss did today. I think that by beating Penn State the way they beat Penn State, they won that preseason competition, if you will, of being ranked higher than Missouri and Penn State and Oregon and those kind of teams.
Yeah, and Missouri loses some guys, like they lose Schrader, off that team, and he was such a big part of that team. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Like, I'm sure it's not great podcast fodder for July and August, but the difference between 5th and 7th next season is immaterial because of the 12-team playoff. Here's the truth about Ole Miss right now is that anything less than a playoff appearance next season, based on what we know today, will be a remarkable disappointment. And for a program to get to that place in that amount of time from where Ole Miss was, I just go back and think about that November night in 2019 when they were losing a 7 or 10-point game or something to Texas A&M, and the program was full. I mean, it kind of felt like, I don't know, Auburn this year. It was kind of flat, just sort of there. For them to be 4 years later or I guess 5 years later in a position where if you don't make the playoff, it's a disappointment. That's incredible.
Did you catch any of that Auburn game today, by the way? Good God.
I did not. Jeffrey texted me a score at one point. That's all I've seen.
I'm shocked, really blown away by that.
I was pretty locked in on writing and covering, and I didn't see anything else. When I got back up to the press box, I saw the Georgia Florida State score, but no, that's literally it. The only other thing I know has happened in sports because Carson texted me in the second quarter about a Knicks Raptors trade. That's the extent of my sports knowledge outside of what happened in this stadium.
Auburn,
which is really nice, by the way. If you've never been here, it's a really nice facility.
Auburn loses 31-13 to Maryland today in the backup quarterback for the Terrapins, and then we are 24 seconds from halftime. The Georgia Bulldogs are up 42-3 on the Florida State Seminoles in the second quarter.
That was the most predictable game. I'm mad at myself. Honestly, the thought that went through my mind when I walked into the press box was, you dumbass, why didn't you just take a couple $100 and just take Georgia and lay whatever, and you're going to feel pretty good about it.
I mean, Georgia is kind of like annoyed in this game, and Florida State has no one playing and is just completely lifeless, and it just is what it is.
I'm not gonna judge Florida State for today. Why would you show up?
I know we haven't hit a lot of specifics on the game today, but you tweeted about it, and I kind of had already written it a little bit in rapid reaction. That was a masterclass on play calling, on avoiding frankly, their problems up front on both sides of the ball, and then what Ole Miss did offensively to maximize matchups. It's what I know people that's been in the stream for the full hour and a half or 2 hours are getting annoyed with me because I keep saying the same thing, but I thought you saw the microcosm today of Lane Weiss, however you want to phrase it, worked to have matchups and then exploited them and took advantage of them and stayed with them. And Franklin or the OC or whoever calls plays at Penn State was determined that, by God, we have to be balanced and we have to throw the football. And Drew Allar could not throw the football. He could not beat Ole Miss. They were averaging 7.5 and 6.6 yards a carry with backs and decided to throw on critical downs. Lane is one of the smartest play callers in college football because he doesn't do dumb stuff. He just finds mismatches and then stays with them. And that's what he did today.
He was really dialed in today. I mean, I'm sure you saw it on TV, but just you could see it from my vantage point. I mean, he was as excited and geeked up about calls and that kind of thing, and kind of everything worked. And if you had told me second series that everything was going to work, I'm not sure I would have believed you, because Ole Miss's offensive front was struggling with Penn State's defensive front, and then Jackson rolled his ankle, and there was one play where Lane got upset at the official, and I was like, did they late hit him or something? And I watched the replay. It was he didn't even make contact with him. His ankle just gave out, and they got him to the sideline and retaped it again and added tape. And for them to be dealing with all of that, and dial up the plays that they dialed up, whoever dialed them up, whatever. It was a clinic. It was artistic. They did some stuff where there were two, and again, this is a really good defense. The whole Penn State's not good, Big Ten's overrated, whatever. No, they're really good. They drew up some stuff that was just masterful, and the trick plays and the Jordan Watkins really couldn't play because he tweaked his hamstring either on Tuesday or Wednesday, and they kept that quiet. But they had a trick play in place for Watkins and still slipped him out there and let him do it, and it works. And they do the power run to Pegues and just some of the stuff that they accomplished was, I've used the word so many times, but it was kind of a remarkable game. I mean, to blow Penn State out in the third quarter the way that they did was just, I didn't see that coming. I thought Ole Miss would win. I picked Ole Miss to win, but I didn't think they'd dominate them like that. That was not even a 13-point game. That was a blowout, and everybody in the stands knew it. I mean, when it got to be 38-17 or whatever, their fans hit the bricks. They knew, and they had a lot of people here too, and they were vocal, and it was just that it was a masterpiece.
55-45 crowd, Ole Miss.
Yeah, I'm not good at that, and it's my first time to ever be in the building. That's probably about right. Both schools were really well represented.
They didn't do anything to hurt their bowl availabilities moving forward if they need to win a tiebreaker.
Oh, no, hell no. No, I mean, I would think today, not that either school probably had to prove itself as a traveling school, but I would think any bowl people looked around and went, yeah, I want one of those teams as long as they're winning, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
As long as it means something, because the Ole Miss people were here excited. Penn State people, they're pretty excited, and they travel, and it was fun. And I heard a few of them. I was out grabbing something to eat late last night, and I heard some of them saying, we thought we were coming to the South for warm weather. And I was like, well, if you'd asked anybody who lived in the South, we would have told you that late December is typically cold here too, champ. But I get it, right? But no, they had a lot of people here. I mean, obviously Ole Miss was the louder team because they had probably a few more fans or a lot more fans, and then they won the game. But Ole Miss people were excited. I mean, y'all would have a better gauge on that than I would. I mean, Brian certainly would. I mean, Brian's kind of out amongst them. I'm really not. So I don't really know about all that part. But there were tons of people here. I think I told you that the other night. I went over to visit a friend who's he's a big Ole Miss guy, and he married a Ruston girl who's become an Ole Miss person, and they have a daughter at Ole Miss. And so I went over and had a beer with them, and they were at the Ole Miss team hotel, and this was Thursday, and by then there were a lot of people spilling into town.
We talk a lot about 2015, the athletic as Laramie was when he kind of went and got the ball that Chad threw for that touchdown. Pegues made one hell of an athletic play on that fumbled snap to pick it up and keep momentum moving right there. Like he's a big guy, but JJ's pretty damn athletic. That wasn't nothing to grab that ball right there on that 4th and 1.
He had fielded a lot of bad snaps earlier in his life, and that his career with fielding bad snaps at Oxford High School paid off handsomely in that moment. I kind of thought that was, and I wrote about it in my notebook a little bit, and I'm going to write more in a little bit. By the way, I'm not through, but I wrote about it in my notebook that I thought it was sort of telling that Lane Kiffin had a couple of 4th downs in his own territory and went for it. James Franklin down a couple of scores, 4th and 1 punts.
Yeah.
And I thought, what are you doing? I mean, an L is an L is an L is an L. I mean, does it matter if it's 27 as opposed to 13? It's just an L.
And it wasn't a 3-3 game. Ole Miss had gotten momentum. They were moving on you. You were having a hard time guarding those wide receivers at that point. It was what it was.
And at that point, Ole Miss had not proven that they were going to definitely shut down a running play. I mean, it just tells you a little something about maybe this era of coaching and that kind of thing. You cannot be afraid. And I think it's one of Lane's strengths is that he does not get ruffled by criticism, whether it's valid or not. Frankly, if it's valid criticism, you don't even get a chance to distribute it because he'll criticize himself. And if it's invalid, he just, I think he makes mental notes about it, but he doesn't let it stop him from being him. And I think you saw that with Franklin. You know, he was like, well, if I go for it here and I don't get it and I give them a short field, they're going to score real quick and people are going to ask me questions about it. Well, what damn difference would it have made? I just thought that was I just thought it was an interesting moment in the game, not pivotal because I think the game was decided by then, but I thought it was interesting. And if I were on the Penn State bench, I'd have been like, Coach doesn't think we can get a yard. Mm-hmm. So what makes me think he thinks we can score 17 unanswered points?
It's been a full circle deal. We've talked about this every week, but I'm just mentioning it because it's worth mentioning. Jackson rolls up that ankle right there. He's hobbled. He's still running the ball in the damn fourth quarter. I mean, you basically have to kill him to get him out of the damn game at that point. I thought he was really good throwing the football. His deep ball was as good as it's been all season at times, even on the bomb leg. I mean, I started the show kind of telling Jeffrey, there was nothing about the performance this year or today that tells me that Jackson Dart can't compete for a national championship as your quarterback at the college level.
Absolutely.
I mean, he just wins games.
That's why I wrote the column that I wrote earlier in the week. I mean, I don't think if you're Ole Miss, you have any choice. I mean, you've got to do whatever you have to do to keep him. And imagine the Penn State team with an elite quarterback. You know, I mean, watch some of these bowl games if you can stomach them. I mean, the teams that don't have quarterback play, it's tough. And the teams that do have quarterback play, they're pretty much playing for stuff.
That's what Jeffrey said. He thought that what was interesting was that Ohio State and Penn State, 1 through 22, probably looked more athletic, but the SEC teams just had such a quarterback advantage that's what led to the wins in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he said that to me in a text too, and I didn't watch a ton of Missouri-Ohio State, but Ohio State has athletes. They just didn't have quarterback play, and then their quarterback hit the portal, and the guys behind them, including the guy that shook up the Ole Miss beat at one point a couple of years ago, you know, they couldn't move the football, and Missouri had at worst adequate quarterback play all season, and at times I thought Cook was pretty good, and so that was a big reason they went 11-2 also.
Missouri will have some perception issues just on how bad Ohio State was with that quarterback to where it felt like it didn't count in a way. You know what I mean? Like going into the preseason, in some ways they're going to get kind of punished in a different way than the way it looked today, if you will.
Yeah, well, going back to one of your questions earlier, I think it's why, you know, late in the season, Missouri looked better than Ole Miss. And today, I thought Ole looked better than Missouri looked yesterday. And Penn State was a lot more dialed in probably than Ohio State was. So, I don't know. If I had a vote today, I'd probably put Ole Miss ahead of Missouri. Not that it matters. Again, 6, 7, whatever.
Yeah.
But if I had a ballot, I'd probably put Ole Miss a spot up.
James Franklin probably would have known they were screwed today if you told him they were going to throw the ball 40 times. They threw the ball 40 times today.
Yeah, he probably would have. I sensed from him the last couple of days that he felt like his team was in for a rough day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a little bit. And I kind of sensed in Kiffin on Friday there was some confidence there. I think I've learned to sort of read some of Lane's answers and the body language and the way that he kind of says some things. I think he felt like they were going to win some one-on-ones, and as long as people executed, that they were going to score enough points to get it done.
I know he made a couple mistakes, but I thought athletically Dudley was pretty good out there.
Yeah, he's real athletic off the edge.
Yeah.
Gives them some length that they haven't really had. Kind of looks like an SEC outside linebacker in ways that maybe nobody else on that team does. Yeah, I mean, I thought he was good. He made a couple of errors, but it was the first football game he's played in a year, so I think we can all forgive him of those. But he did bring them some energy, and he was disruptive. They had to account for him on some pass rushes. He missed Aller at one point, and Aller made him pay for it. I think ran for like 20 yards or something on a play. But yeah, he was good. I mean, look, he's the kind of athlete that they're going to add to this defense next season. It's really the job Pete Golding did this year with that group, and the job that group did, sort of maximizing what they had and what they didn't have, was pretty amazing.
Yeah, they're not littered with first-round picks. It's not.
No.
That's what the thing, forget the opt-outs or whatever. It was that you look at Penn State, who had the same record and got pummeled today. They had a lot of NFL guys on that team. A lot of NFL dudes on that roster. I mean,
there'll be a whole lot of NFL people will be at their pro day.
I mean, that was a.
They were good-looking dudes too. I mean, you know what I mean. I mean, like watching those guys come to the media stuff, and when they walked away, like there's some big guys on that team. Drew Aller's a big kid. The tight end that did nothing today, really, he's a big, good-looking. You see why the NFL likes him. The offensive line is big. They're just a big team. They're good. I mean, I'm sure there will be a lot of revisionist history on Penn State, and I disagree with it. I think they're really solid.
I know you said that they kind of disregarded it. What exactly did Dart and Judkins say? They would make a decision in the coming days, or what? What was the call there?
I'm trying to remember the exact words. Quinshon just said, "Hey, I haven't really had a chance to think about it." Which, come on, but okay. And then Jackson's was, "I'm going to enjoy this tonight," and I'll get to that when the time is right, or something along those lines. I don't remember exactly. I'll have it. I will write it tonight before I finish up. You got to think they're coming back. I mean, look, Jackson has all the leverage in the world, and he's got more leverage today than he had yesterday even. And he had a ton yesterday. So, and then, Quinshon's a hell of a back. And I'm sure that if you're all in, you're all in. The one thing you saw today was that for them to win a title, right? If we're going to talk about winning a national title, they do have to get significantly better up front. You just, on offense, you just can't be that porous and that vulnerable up front and make a playoff and then win 3 playoff games or even 4 you got to get better than that.
Penn State showed them what you have to be up front on both sides.
Yeah. I mean, because look, if you're going to play in this building or in a building like this one in 367 days in a national quarterfinal, you will have to be better up front than they are. But if they're better up front, there's no reason that Ole Miss can't be a national title contender, because they're going to be significantly better on defense.
Yes, Ken, you're right. Jared Ivey is a really good dude on and off the field. There's no doubt about that. He's just a good guy.
Probably he and Jackson are probably the 2 favorite guys for media. Since just gotten over here lately, he's just super guarded with what he says, and I'm sure there's a lot going on there and all that. But yeah, everybody on the beat loves Jared. He's you probably, if you told us you guys can talk to one person this week, it'd probably be him.
So last thing, we kind of close it up 11-2 here to finish this thing off. Just kind of remarkable, and again, it's going to be kind of like the NFL for us a little bit from coverage standpoint. It's going to be kind of 365 of football in a way heading into next season. They clearly have to get better on the offensive line. There's still 2 more portal periods. They have to avoid any retention issues with their current players in the portal. That thing opens up here in a few days for about a week or so, right? Something like that.
So you've got to get in the portal.
No, you got to get in by the 2nd. Never mind. It's open now. And you have to be in by the end of January 2nd. Sorry, that's
there's a visit period that opens up January 3rd through the 7th for people who will be enrolling in the spring semester.
Correct.
And then it will close for a while, and then it'll open again on May the 1st through the 15th, I think.
And then, just as we had said earlier, the way the court rulings are currently established, a player who gets in prior to January the 2nd ending can transfer this season without penalty, regardless of how many times they have previously transferred.
That's the way I understand it as well.
Yeah. As of now, that is where it sits. We'll go from there, but that's what we know as of this point with that situation. But I don't know. I mean, I've asked you everything I knew to ask, but just final thoughts. Anything we missed? Season, day, game in general.
I'm sure you did this, but I want to thank. It's expensive, and I needed. I'm glad that I had the help.
Neil, you had a quick breakup right there. Hey,
us
real
to
quick.
have what I thought was at least decent coverage from a really big week for Ole Miss football, and that's probably my biggest thing. I want to make sure I said that because I really appreciate those guys.
Southern and Comer on that.
Did I lose you?
No, you got me. I was filling in a blank. You had broken up for just a second, but then you came back, so I was making sure we knew what we were talking about there. So Neil was thanking Eric Payne and all the guys at Comer and Southern for their help and their partnership with us this season for the bowl trip. As he was saying, it's expensive, and they have been a great partner to us for a long time with that. They are outstanding, and we appreciate them for business purposes and friendship purposes as well there with Comer and Southern and all that they have done for us at this juncture as well. So you got more coverage coming, I assume, and then you're headed back in the morning. I assume you're staying tonight. You're not usually a drive back late kind of guy.
Yeah, no, I've got another couple of hours of work. I'm gonna get all the video and stuff from the Peach Bowl. I do want to say, let me say it because I want to go on record as saying it. There might be a couple of bowls that are as good as this one is to media, and when I say to media, I don't mean like giving us stuff. I'm talking about understanding what we do and making it efficient. They're amazing. These guys are awesome. Gary Stoken and Matt Garvey and their whole staff, the people that do the transcriptions. I mean, I thank them personally because God, they saves us hours. Mm-hmm. The video, the website, the ability to download and upload, and all of the stuff that they do. The hotel, they're just amazing, man. I mean, they're an it's an incredible bowl, and they more importantly, and people care about this a lot more than how they treat us. The way they take care of the teams, the players, it's first class. It's a first class deal. It really is. It's literally. If I tried to come up with a complaint, I don't think I could come up with one. Literally nothing. Everything from in the morning. When I walked into the big media hospitality thing, and the guy could tell that I just stumbled out of bed, basically. And he's like, the good coffee's back there. Yeah. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? He goes, the strong coffee. I was like, oh, thank you. And I went, I mean, like, just everything. They some of these people, like some of the staff and stuff, know my name now. I mean, I've been here since Tuesday early afternoon, but I know nobody in the thread cares. I just want to say it for the record. The Peach Bowl's awesome. They're just fantastic.
You know, I maybe I told Brian or Jeffrey this. We went into this season thinking 8-4, 7-5, 9-3. It's fairly remarkable on what ended up being what started out as not a throwaway year, but a year to get to the next year. And they did that, but in a totally different way than we kind of had anticipated or expected.
Yeah, I'll wide open 100% admit that I would never have believed 11-2 watching preseason camp. No way. Wouldn't have seen it. I think this team maximized. I think it literally reached its ceiling, maybe broke through its ceiling. It was not a national championship team. Lane will tell you that. Anybody in that building will tell you that. But I think they saw what you had to do. If we're back in this building or a building like this one in 367 days, the game in Athens will be the reason why. Because it was such that it took away any ability to trick yourself. It was, nope, that if we want to do this, and he does, this is what we have to do. And yet, with those limitations, to still win 11 games, to beat LSU, to beat Penn State, to beat Tulane in New Orleans, to run the table at home all of the things that they did. It's a remarkable accomplishment. I mean, I really almost felt intimidated writing the column today because I knew it needed to hit the right chords, and because this was such a season where they just maximized, and you don't see that very often. Usually at the end of the year, for anybody short of the national champion, you're like, if they'd only done this or this or this. I don't think you can do that with Ole Miss.
Yeah.
I don't think they were as good as Alabama. I thought Alabama leaned on them in the second half. And then they clearly were not as good as Georgia. They weren't ready for that moment. They didn't have the athletes to win that game on defense. And they're working on it. It's changing. And, I mean, Lane did – one of the things he did say was there's a few guys left that they're working on, and maybe this will push them over the top. They've set there will be no Houston nut cowering from the high expectations. I'm not saying that they won't underachieve. We'll see, right? Who knows? You got to win on the field, but they won't run from the expectations that you should be a title contender next season.
Yeah, because last thing period is Penn State was really good up front on both sides, but the way the rest of the game went, you could have tricked yourself. Had that been the game, you go, well, whatever. We still won. We blew them out.
Yep.
It wasn't that, hey, no, we have a line problem. We have to fix the line problem. They have to look different, and then we go. You convince yourself you coach around it. And, Georgia didn't allow that in any way whatsoever. So
yeah, you can convince yourself on that Alabama game, if we just been healthier, if we just had Harris, if a call had gone a different way, maybe it would have – no, they're better than you. They were better than you up front. And you had to acknowledge it, and then so it was a good thing for them that Georgia happened. The way that Georgia happened, it made it where, nope, got to attack this head on. Got to acknowledge it, and they're doing it. They have. The team next season will be better than the team this season. Doesn't mean it'll have a better record or it'll achieve the same thing, because one thing that Trey Harris said, and it was important. This team didn't have a lot of ego. This team had a lot of buy-in. There was very little off-field stuff, very little locker room issue. You're bringing in a lot of people from other places, and so you got to get that same degree of buy-in. You got to have the same kind of culture, the same kind of lack of ego, if you're gonna pull it off.
Yeah, more coverage coming at Rebel Grove. Enjoy it. Be safe tomorrow, and we'll talk.
Okay.
That was Neil McCready joining us there from Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta for that. Let me get that box off there. Sorry about that. Ole Miss 38, Penn State 25. The Rebels go 11-2 on the season, the first 11-2 first 11 win season in program history. They've only won 10 regular season games twice. They've done that both times in the last 3 years. Obviously, they've only been playing 12 regular season games for a short period of time as well. But that's irrelevant. Ole Miss certainly on the trend upward right now. Neil's thanking people. Want to thank Dead Soxy again. Remember, go to Dead Soxy, pick up your socks. The no-shows are great. The dress socks are great. You get a subscription, and when you do that, you get a free pair of Juice Kiffin socks that are right there on the screen. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see it there. Take advantage of that from Dead Soxy. They've been a great partner for 2 years. We really appreciate them for being our title sponsor. And they do make a great product there with Dead Soxy. And then just kind of last thing, thanks to you guys. You've been with us every day. You've been with us for a decade in a lot of ways. It's a great time to be covering Ole Miss. I know it's a great time for you guys to be a fan of Ole Miss, and you show up. You do all of our crazy stuff we ask of you. You give us your time and your schedule, depending on what it is. You make it work for us. We really appreciate this. Couldn't do it without you. I really mean that. We're through the holiday season, and you guys mean the world to me on what it means to have you guys as a community and follow us every single day. So Neil will be back tomorrow. We'll have a normal podcast on Tuesday. Will be what we do there. Obviously not on New Year's Day, but we'll have a podcast Tuesday. Some cool stuff coming next week, actually, that we've got scheduled up for that. And we'll continue talking about it. I mean, it doesn't stop now. It'll be portal, and it will be already looking ahead to next season. Ole Miss also has an undefeated basketball team. They play tomorrow against Bryant, and then we'll have an SEC hoop season as well. So a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of good stuff going on, and then a full off season of Ole Miss football A lot of anticipation heading into Ole Miss and Furman from Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, a place Ole Miss has won 20 of their last 22, and they are trying to make a playoff next season. Ole Miss wins the Peach Bowl, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, over the Penn State Nittany Lions in this SEC Big Ten game, 38-25 in this one. So again, thanks to you guys. Thanks to Neil, Brian, and Jeffrey for making it a great post-game show. Plenty of coverage at rebelgrove.com and on our MPW Digital channel, and we will talk to you again very soon.